Hey guys, Mochi here, and we're back with the Swordcraft Steel Rebellion Take 2 Draft Infographic update. So in this video, I'm going to cover the Steel Rebellion inclusions, as well as some cards that might have gone up and down just through the format changes or things coming in or out. So starting with the Troa, this is a 3 play point 2/2, understated for what you pay for, and it has a clause where it gains stats or a tagline depending on whether you have enough officer or commanders in your hand. So there's a problem with sort of a officer slash commander matters card, especially nowadays for Swordcraft, because we have things coming in like the Machina tags. These things actually do not count as Swordcraft followers. So when you draft these, have these in hand, they actually won't proc either of these. And then just having officers in hand, which is the more common one, you're only getting a 3 play point 2/2 out of it with Rush. We've had stuff like Novice Trooper and Juliet. Those were 3 play point 2/2 storms that hit face better and interacted with stuff better. And if you're getting just that out of it, it's not really worth drafting. And similarly with the commander tag, you're only getting a 3 play point 3/3 out of it, which you can already draft this card and this card from it. So both those opportunity cost wise, it's not really worth the consistency of just drafting a 3 play point 2/2 that might actually just end up staying a 2/2. But if you get them both together, it can be very premium, especially if you get the Evo tag alongside it. If you have two commanders in hand, then the Evo tag is basically free. So it's like a 3 play point 3/3 with a ping attached. So that can be good, but commanders are a bit harder to keep in hand than officers. The ones that do stay in hand, they might be pressured to come out just because they're 2 drops. And the higher cost commanders, you might actually want to just mulligan away. And having this proc in the late game is pretty inconsistent, just having evos for the time or just having enough cards in your hand. So this is mainly just an early game drop that has a lot of consistency issues. So you can draft it like sort of here, but you're gonna just run into a bunch of problems just having a bunch of spells in hand, neutrals in hand, and just Machina stuff, just random stuff that won't help you proc it. And it's really relying on draw order and just play order that it's not really reliable to just get a bunch of these benefits. And the top side of just getting both these to proc in a good way is pretty hard to do. So there's no reason to draft it when you can just draft standard good 3 drops and just standard good golds and legendaries. So next up we got the Stampeding Fortress. Well, I guess I'll do the Johan first. This one's very similar to the Shadowcraft 5-drop, where it's a 3/5 rush. These tags will matter, mainly the first one. So depending on how many Cyber Cannoneers you can draft, this card will go a bit higher in value. This is more like future-proofing it when Cyber Cannoneers are less draftable and you'll have less of them in the pool. So the Johan will be able to boost much less frequently, because you actually do have to get at minimum two discounts in order to make this basically a playable 5 play point 3/5 rush. And the problem with the second tag is giving your other Machina followers rush is you might actually not draft too many after that. Just getting a Cyber Cannoneer off, that's great. Getting it to 4, this thing is still pressured to come out on 2 or 3, so you have to work to actually get this off for 4, and you actually have to have the Johan in hand as well. So if this isn't in your mulligan, you might actually still not want to keep this in your mulligan, because if you keep something like this and this into your mulligan, it's going to be very hard to get your Cyber Cannoneer off on 4, because you're going to have a pretty clunky hand, and you have to top deck a lot of plays on 2 and 3 in order to actually be able to drop the Cannoneer without skipping a turn or 2. So because of that, the Johan's going to be pretty hard to keep in hand, and later in the game, obviously, there's going to be less Machina stuff in your hand or on the board, so this might not be able to discount it as much, and if it stays 6 or 7 play points, it's not very strong. And again, having the Machina followers in hand as a follow-up for this bonus won't really happen, so mainly you're just trying to build a 5 play point or even 3 or 4 play point 3/5 rush. So it has potential to go off if you get like the triple Cyber Cannoneer draft with maybe like a couple follow-up Machinas, but especially in the future it's gonna be here. But for now it's still sort of here as sort of like a risk you can take. If you get a good draft, you can definitely take it, but in the general draft or in your first picks, you should be wary of drafting it still. Alright, so next up, the Stampeding Fortress. This has the failsafe of just being sort of a 9 play point play or a 4 play point vanilla play. If you get the high roll where you actually have the Machina cards in your hand, maybe you have like a Mecha Blade and somehow are able to keep a Cyber Cannoneer in hand, then sure, you can snowball a game and basically win a game off evoing this on 4 or 5. But for the most part, this will be vanilla, mainly just because of the problems of keeping Machinas in your hand. You can't rely on just having neutrals. Maybe you can get the Robo Goblin or 2 just because of this expansion. But again, in future expansions, maybe there won't be as much Machina in the pool, or just just drafting this is unreliable. So even getting this off in a high density Machina deck is very hard in constructed sometimes. But especially in Take 2, you're going to have a diluted pool of just Machina stuff, so you won't be able to reliably get the Evo off. But just having a 4 play point 4/3 that Evo standard, or a 9 play point that has a premium, it gains a lot of stats from this and just the free rush in. So it's sort of like a different flavor of Savage Swordsman, just a 4 play point vanilla and then a 9 play point really big vanilla rush. So that's good enough, and if you end up getting the upside, it's definitely very good. Alright, so last up here we got the Lesia. This thing's definitely the most premium thing that Sword got in this expansion. Just a freebie Evo for officers, and officers are the easiest to proc, even with like Machina stuff in the pool. Sometimes you have to be wary about dropping a commander alongside it. Sometimes those pesky 2 play point or 1 play point things, they actually have commander tags instead of officer tags, so be sure not to mess that up. But otherwise, this will be basically a freebie Evo in the mid game. You'll crash this in and then you'll get the no-no. You can actually just Evo this standard if you have no choice or you want to snowball a play or something on like turn 4. So you can just get a 5/5 and a 1/1 Bane, and that contests board really well. It has potential to snowball. They have to clear both of them with an Evo ping or just stuff on board, as well as clear whatever you might have on board. So this is very premium. And to add it on top of that, it has a very strong card it draws on the 10th turn or later. You get the no-no and you get the Twilight Blade. The Twilight Blade is a 5 play point spell, which AoEs for 5 onto everything on the opponent's board and the face. So you can get the constructed level quick blader combo on turn 10. Also be careful, like it doesn't work with enhances. If Axe Princess was still in the pool, it wouldn't work with that because it's a commander. So again, make sure that you account for that, but for the most part it's mainly just quick blader that procs it. Maybe something in the future would proc it, but yeah, getting the Twilight Blade in the late game, you're gonna drop an officer alongside it. For that turn, you'll just have the no-no free rush with a 5/5 and just whatever you play on board. And then for the next turn, your opponent's basically in a very precarious situation. They have to remove the Lesia and everything you played, and they're also basically going to get their board wiped, as well as a ton of face damage. So this is a very strong finisher for Sword, a very strong value tool in the mid game and going into the late game. Extremely premium tool. Nothing much to say about the Technolord. There are some decent premium targets to resurrect, mainly just the Johan and the Mecha Blade if you get it. But Cyber Cannoneer is not too great if you get it, and you have a solid like late game drops again you can draft, so there's not a huge incentive to drop the Technolord. You can make use of the Accelerate though if you have like a lot of Cannoneers dying, which is the thing. For the Odin, this is one of the Sword's actually only sort of straight from hand Storm potential cards with rotations of some certain key cards with Storm. So you might want to consider it, but there's still like decent stuff in the pool, decent ways to get reach. So you can put it up here or here. And for the DNA, it ended up around here, and for the Master Dealer, it's around here. So nothing really changed from the Ultra Sphere mini expansion. So anyways, on to the silver cards. Glorious Core. It's a Evo recovery card that's not very good. So that's a first for Swordcraft, I guess. So it's similar to the cycle of cores. It's got the Fanfare 7 where it can enhance for 7, and then it gains a free benefit based on your Evos. So you can play this on 3, or you can play this on 7 or plus. So if you play it on 3, you have to have something like a Floral Fencer kind of effect, like we have Cyber Cannoneer now, maybe if you get this off or something. Basically anything that you play that swarms the board, mainly it's just this out of being common. You swarm the board or have a board established prior, you evo everything, and then everything gains a bunch of stats. The main problem with this is you have to skip your turn 3, so your opponent's going to put a lot of pressure on the board, they're going to trade away with everything on board, and then you basically have to have a good play, and just having this and this, it's not even good enough. You're only getting like something like 5/5 and then 2/2 split board. That's not much better than like a Floral Fence or Cavalier kind of evo, and the opponent can just clear everything with like an evo ping, premium evo, stuff like that, which they normally have. And again, you lose a lot of tempo on just skipping a turn 3/onward whenever you try to do this sort of combo. And even late game, like the buff you get, if you can play like a 7 play point, it's not do nothing of course, but it doesn't establish on the board. You're already sort of like snowballing. You can play something like a Dauntless for 7, which is massive stats on 7 and just AoEs for like a better rate than something like this. Especially like because everything in Sword is like very small. Like if you're already like snowballing, it doesn't really help you because you could just play something big alongside that. And if you're struggling to get on board, this especially can be a brick. So it's not really worth drafting the Glorious Core, in my opinion at least. Next up, we got the Ivory Sword Dance. This card's very interesting. It's doing some pretty nasty things in Constructed with Leo. Oh, this is another card that bumped up. It's rightfully been bumped up recently just because of the things it can do. 2-for-1 potential. It actually interacts very well with this card, as many of you might know. So yeah, just a bunch of good stuff alongside it. Free Evo Ping, free restuff, stuff like that. That you're pretty pretty well know about it. So about the Ivory Swords dance, yeah, it scales very well with just ambush followers and just anything on board. It scales well with just general evos. Anything you evo that's like a 3-drop or a 2-drop, you just evo it and then you cast this and then pings everything. It's only got a slight clunkiness of just being like not being spine blade and also sometimes not pinging stuff in the early game, because if you draft, like, for example, let's pretend this is like a premium card that you draft like 3 of this. If you draft 3 of this is going to end up in a ton of your mulligans, and it can be very clunky in the early game where you have to do like something, like you have to play it as a 2 or 1 drop, and obviously you can't play this because you don't have anything on board and you're playing Swordcraft, so your opponent's basically not going to let you stick something on board. So this can be clunky in the early game, so drafting a ton of these sometimes isn't the way to go. 2 or 3 drops, again, interact very well with it. You can use it late game with anything that's like 5 or 6 drop and then get a bunch of pings off it. And then sometimes you can just combo and get the free enhance 5 for the free value. So it ends up being like pretty good. Sometimes it can screw you over, but for the most part, it'll be a very solid card. You'll be happy to see 1 of it, and sometimes in some decks 2 of it. Last up, we got the Mecha Billiard. This is sort of like a 6 play point version of the King. Just AoEs for 1, and then it gets a premium where it can AoE for 2. It's definitely a very solid card. Just 6 play point 4/6. It's very big for something in Sword. Sword's actually missing 5 drops, but it at least has a solid 6 drop as a foundation now. So just allowing you to recover from clearing board. In general, just a 4/6 that trades really well, and just AoEs for stuff. Sometimes you get the free Machina bonus alongside it. So you'll be very happy to pick this up, as well as the Machina tag, which sometimes can be relevant. Alright, last up we got the bronzes. So Dual Blade Fury. Unfortunately, as cool as this card looks, it's not very good. Like, sometimes maybe you can like use something that's stealthed, like evo it and double attack, build your own Unsheathed Blade DNA combo or something. But other than that, it doesn't trade very well. It doesn't even give it a Bane or anything. A lot of Swordcraft stuff is very small. So just giving something from hand, you're already wasting 5 play points on it. So you have to play something maybe like a 3-drop, giving it a double attack rush. It's not going to trade into anything very well. So mainly it has to hit on something on board, and then you're in that sort of situation where maybe if you can go face and double attack and that gives you your lethal, obviously the card can be like premium, but in all situations other than that, it doesn't help you trade very well, and the double attacks a lot of the time are wasted just because of the low defense of a lot of Swordcraft followers. We don't have much changes here. Tina got worse just because it lost Axe Princess as a target, so it's a lot less inconsistent. Godsend got worse because we don't have Ramparts anymore, so we don't have reliable token generators like on the opponent's turn that reliably stick. You can still get Age Worn / Grand Auction for it, but it's not as strong, and you don't draft this card, you mainly just draft it off auction. So next up we got the Phantom Assassin. A lot of people compare it sort of, I won't say unfairly, to Tana, like, oh, Tana's better, like, yeah, you'd rather play this in a constructed deck or something, but this is Take Two. Like, these cards are actually like relatively fine. Like, Tana's got its upsides and Phantom Assassin's got its upsides. This thing doesn't let 2 drops evo very well. Like Tana, they just evo into your other stuff, and your Tana's in a weird situation. If you hit face, then the opponent just hits you with a ping. If you leave it stealth, then they can just trade against other stuff. This thing, at least, it stays up in the open, where I'm sure the opponent can ping it off, but it also defers their evos, where sometimes they can't evo something into it just because it has the Bane tag, and where otherwise they could just establish on board or hit something else. So it does have its upsides, and it does hit in very well. Like, this one, compared to Tana, actually has the benefit of just hitting face, and it hits it very hard, so the opponent actually has to deal with it. So again, they have their ups and downs. You'll draft them sort of the same, but in my opinion, I consider this one better. Slight changes here. So mainly, Swordcraft actually has like sort of a sequencing problem, mainly because of their 2 drops. They're like so good. So just going on to like one of them is like Dauntless Commander. Like, this thing is very good for sort of Swordcraft's game plan. Unfortunately, the buff isn't as good as it could be. It could be like a 1/1, but it probably would have been too good. But in the similar vein to like all of these, the set of these cards, it either gains a 3/3 or 4/4. This one's a 1/3 that gains 4, so it's technically a 7-drop as well. 5/7 has very good stats for 7, but mainly it comes down on 2 for 2 and 3 alongside something. So like you evo War Dog, something like that, and you turn the War Dog into like a very premium evo 5/7, something like that. But it has problems coming out similar with all the other Swordcraft cards. It's mainly like a sequencing thing because Cyber Cannoneer is so good. It's like the reliable 4-drop Swarm card for Sword. So all your other 2-drops are basically forced to sequence out quicker. So like the best one is like the Usurpation, because you play it and the opponent doesn't know what you have in hand. But if you play a Cyber Cannoneer out, they basically know you don't have any of these cards in your hand. Maybe like not this, but That's a main thing that sort of pushes like the Tycoon down or like this down, just because you're so pressured to play general good stuff 2-drops that to hide the fact that you have a Cannoneer, or to actually preserve the Cannoneer in your hand, that it's actually like hard to like play these down for like a ton of value. Playing this for like a 7-drop, or playing this for like the 7 draw 3 or draw whatever. Like playing these down is like very hard in the late game, just because swords curves are so low. They have to play them as just general 2-drops because they don't have like 5-drops. They have to do like the Evo 3-drop, 2-drop play or something like that. So again, keeping these cards in hand is very hard to get the value off it. That's mainly the reason the Tycoon's down and why the Dauntless isn't as high. Mainly because this buff isn't as good. You can definitely draft differently to make like the Dauntless better, or just play it as strictly sort of a 7-drop. It just makes your Cannoneers worse. It makes your Evo plays worse. So mainly this thing just weaves in flexibly, stuff like that. And it's like fairly decent, just sometimes getting off alongside a 2 or 3-drop, and then basically letting it trade for free, and which they normally do, which is the main issue with that, and they can just trade in with regular stuff. Another change that was pretty recent was this thing came out. This thing came up, and White General, it didn't come down, but it's not as good anymore, mainly because there's more Machina stuff in the pool, which is like a minor thing, but Ramparts is gone, so it doesn't have that sort of reliable freebie, sort of get a free ping off something for like 3 instead of 1, which it was very strong when Ramparts is in the pool. So White General, you might want to consider less. You might actually want to bump Battlefield Beauty up, just because you need sort of like a 5-drop fill-in sort of card. So you might want to bump this one up as well. But the Zealot was always good, so it got a bump up. And last up, the Cannoneer. I've talked about this card with like the other stuff. It's very premium. It's sort of your like floral fencer type effect in Sword that it definitely appreciates. It makes all your pings / AoE stuff better, just because it puts a lot of bodies on board, and then you can default back to maybe sort of like a control-y game plan, just because like just having a bunch of tokens on board with sort of an AoE or multi-pings, that really helps you shave down on the board and maybe go on a more value roll. And just having a bunch of like freebie followers alongside one, like split board, you can always go for the aggro game plan. It's good in the value game plan. So you'll be very happy to pick up as many of these Cyber Cannoneers as you want. But again, I just want to stress that it makes all your 2-drops very pressured to come out. So you gotta draft these sparingly. Like you only see a finite amount of 2-drops in the pool, similar to the Bloodcraft's Bewitching Succubus. So these things can be hard to get out. And again, stuff like Spineblade, Weather Vanguard, War Dog, all these cards are very premium to draft alongside it. So Swordcraft's in an interesting place at the moment. It's sort of like an aggro value deck, but a lot of decks are sort of like that, Blood and Forest. It's in a weird position, but it's still a very solid deck. So I guess that's about it for the changes / plus additions, and I guess I'll see you in the next one.